Hello, welcome to the Self-Healing Revolution, where ancient wisdom and modern science meet. I am your host, Paige Pierman, owner of Love Yourself, an Ayurvedic and integrative practice based in Louisville, Kentucky. My hope for this summit is that you will find ways to self-heal your life with experts who are covering the areas of biohack your body, master your mind, and elevate your soul. It was through a journey of over a decade of healing my own life that I found that there was not one path, but many paths to healing. And it has been my dharma or life purpose to share how to self-heal your body. And I am so excited today to welcome you to my guest, Corey Pine Shane, who is hold on a second, who started the Blue Ridge School of Herbal Medicine in 1999 near Asheville, North Carolina, teaching people how to artfully blend Chinese and Western herbal traditions with a focus on local plants. His book, Southeast Medicinal Plants, covers how to identify, ethically harvest, and use the wild plants of the Southeast, and features his photography. He has taught across the United States and in Europe at many national herbal conferences and is a professional member of the American Herbalist Guild. He is a strong believer in the healing power of nature, including our own bodies, and believes that herbs and herbal philosophy have a special place in modern healthcare. Corey, I am so honored to have you as part of the summit.
Oh, thank you, Paige. Good to be here.
Yes, thank you. So I just absolutely love North Carolina and the Asheville region, and am honored to have somebody who understands the plants of the Southeast, me being here in Kentucky. So I wonder, how is the philosophy of herbal medicine differ than conventional medicine?
I know it's an interesting question because it's not just substituting an herb for a drug. I mean, it can be, and that can be helpful. It's not just, oh, instead of taking aspirin, take willow bark, because they're both anti-inflammatory, they're both pain relievers. But herbal medicine as a philosophy, if someone comes to me with a headache, I might ask what kind of pain it is, when does it start? Like, I would ask a lot of questions and come up with a holistic assessment. And for me, the big thing is trying to find the root cause of the disease, trying to find, like, okay, why do you get headaches? Like, what's bringing about this symptom, instead of just trying to squash the symptom. So I feel like that piece of like root cause is that's something that I struggle towards with every client, something that we're always trying. It's the mystery of our bodies that I'm always playing with and trying to, get a little bit closer to that core of how do our bodies work?
Right. So like take a headache, for example, what might be causing one person's headache could be gut-based issues. Another person could be stress. Another person could be tension or pain somewhere else in the body, like deferred. So in herbalism, right, there would be many different, you wouldn't necessarily prescribe one herb because you would know that that root cause might come from a different place.
Right. One person, it might be an herb to relax the muscles. Somebody else, it might be magnesium. Somebody else might be drink more water. You're dehydrated. That's why you have a headache.
Yeah. So getting to that root cause. So when somebody's looking at herbalism, do you find that they feel like they have to do herbalism or do conventional medicine, or do you think that people understand that they can still be working with their prescription drugs, but there may be herbs are strong, right? So how do people come across when they're on a prescription medicine and they want to take an herb? Sometimes that herb might compete with that drug. What would you say to somebody who's interested in this path, but maybe on prescription medicine?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I don't remember the exact statistic, but I'm sure that more than half of Americans are on some prescription drug regularly, more
Exactly.
adults at least. So one thing I would say is that first off, herbs are generally safe and gentler than the drugs, but it doesn't mean that they should just be used, with the prescription drugs without research. I think it is totally great to use both at the same time. Someone could be taking an antibiotic, like a prescription antibiotic, and at the same time also be taking golden seal and echinacea. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Um, and I think there are fewer herb drug interactions than most people fear, but they are there, and it's important to research those and know that you're not doing something that could be dangerous. Number one thing I would suggest, I mean, first off, always look it up to be sure. But the number one thing I would suggest is the drug a potentially dangerous drug?
Yeah. You know, I like what you said, that herbs are subtle and that they're not like a big punch, like a pharmaceutical. Like an antibiotic throws a big punch to the body, whereas herbs are subtle. And at the same time, I think it's important that people turn to herbalists and turn to people who are really the professionals in the field versus just the internet, right? Like in your school, you're training people that study and really get up close and personal with those herbs and understand the energetics behind them. So people come to herbs sometimes just through their own research, but they may not understand the energetics of their body as well as an herbalist would. And they're highly trained and up close and personal, right? So like you said, if there's a concern for that drug interaction, then bring in a truly trained herbalist to help you.
Oh yeah, I think that's always the best. Ask someone who really knows. They know the herbs that most herbalists should know. Like herbalists are trained usually to know, like, what are the potential herb drug what are the potential herb drug interactions? Someone is on blood thinners, don't give them ginkgo. Someone is on an MAOI, like antidepressant, maybe don't use St. John's wort because there might be an interaction there.
Right. So I think it's so important when people get into natural healing that they can heal themselves, but also don't underestimate the power of a trained practitioner.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that kind of comes back to what we were talking about before of like knowing, like, okay, like what kind of headache, what kind of depression, what kind of infection does someone have? And I should have mentioned that before too, but it's not just substituting like an herbal antibiotic for a pharmaceutical antibiotic. If someone comes to me and they have an infection, I might give them herbs that are antibacterial. But I might also give herbs that stimulate their immune system, or herbs that clear mucus, or herbs that, support their gut. There might be other things going on in their body that contribute to either their health or their illness.
Exactly. I love what you just said, that if someone's exposed to something, most likely their immune system is more compromised, or they haven't been following an Ayurveda, which would be practices to protect their immunity. And I like what you said. It's like, typically there's a lot more involved than just you got a symptom.
Right.
There's a lot of things that are at play. And given that we have a Western world where we're exposed to technology, we're exposed to a lot of processed foods, we're exposed to a lot of environmental toxins, and time on technology and outside of nature herself, it's multi-layered, right?
Right. Right. I mean, just as an example, there's scientific studies showing that physical activity is just as effective as the main antidepressants for helping depression, which is interesting. I mean, you've already heard me talk some about, lifestyle and supplements. And so herbal medicine isn't always just about taking the herbs. It's about how we live, how we connect to nature, how we eat,
And that's one of the things that I loved when I found the Blue Ridge School of Herbalism, is that you aren't just doing herbalism through teaching courses on the internet. You're teaching your herbalists to know the plants, like be out in the environment and see how they grow, see where they thrive. Like, I would assume, being an Ayurvedic practitioner, that if you are out in nature, you have a better understanding of the energetics of that herb by seeing its environment in which it's thriving and living.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And that And like learning an herb on the internet through a picture isn't going to show you the energetics of how that herb became medicinal in the first place.
Right. Yeah, there's something kind of magical happens when you meet a plant in person. I remember I was teaching some naturopathic medical students were out here, and I remember I was on an herb walk with them, and I showed them, oh, and this plant is black cohosh, and one of them was like, oh my God, black cohosh is a plant, and they felt a little embarrassed about it afterwards because I realized what they said, but it's true. Like even in like the herbal or naturopathic world, there can be this disconnect between like, oh, this bottle of pills and like this plant. And so I love that piece. I mean, I've started doing a few small online classes, but all my major programs are in person. They're live, in person, and outdoors, because the more we connect to nature, the more healthy we will be.
And like having a true practitioner be immersed in what it's actually learning. Like plants are in the plant kingdom world, and like they're not on computers and they're not in offices. And I was told when I studied Ayurveda that if I really wanted to understand a plant, I should eat it, I should cook with it, I should smell it, I should touch it, I should meditate with it, so that I could download the energetics of that plant. And just like spend a week or spend 2 weeks just with one plant so that you can ascertain the medicine of that plant versus, like you said, just coming in a bottle in a capsule form.
Yeah, I love that. It's actually one of the things I have my students do is they pick a plant every week they're in class and sit with that plant for a week and like make a tea of it every day, or take a tincture, or sit with the plant, hopefully several of those things. And it's really different than just kind of learning it like, oh, this plant does this, 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 and this. I mean, we can learn that. We can learn, oh, turmeric does this and echinacea does this. But when you actually like sit with the plant, you try it and you feel how it moves in your body, you get a much more sensory, embodied approach, or embodied understanding of what the plant does, how it affects our body, and not just like, oh, this kills bacteria, or this affects the heart. Yeah.
When I studied Ayurveda, I've obviously read it in the books and I've been on the online courses, but nothing has ever replaced the live, practical, in-person, hands-on training that you learn when you're in dance with the plant. Like you're fusing with it, and you get a deeper understanding when you can like touch it and smell it and feel the texture of it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm also a wild crafter, which means I harvest plants from the wild as part of my tincture business. And I feel that when I go to harvest black cohosh or blue cohosh or wild yam, and I do it in a way that's relational, in a way that's really understanding what the plant is and its role in that ecosystem. When I harvest it, I have a better understanding both of that ecosystem, but also of that plant. I feel like I get to know the plant better. And some of that comes through when I'm working with clients and I'm using that plant for that client. Some of that feeling of my connection with that plant comes through. And I think it affects the energy of the medicine, of the healing.
I believe it does. And also every year, like we have dry years and then we have moist years, and we're going through climate change. And so that plant is also going through its own cyclical nature, that maybe you found black cohosh 5 years ago, and you may find it even in a different environment, not in the exact same place you found it before. And it's going to have its own energetics about it, just by the cyclical aspect of nature herself. And like I said, some years are dry, some years are moist. And so we know that to be true. Like when we harvest plants that we're eating, outside of herbs, we know that there's years that the yields are different.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's like a really like deep level of herbal medicine too. Because people always say like, oh, like this plant does this, but then like, well, what if you take the plant as a tea or as a tincture, Or what if you just sit with the plant? What if you harvested the plant, as you said, like what if you harvested in a dry year versus a moist year? And it gets into these subtleties. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. And that's why I think, again, I just have to emphasize that it is a profession in the sense that it takes time to understand those layers, to understand the layers of how plant medicine works. So how do you define plant medicine and healing? How do you define what makes it so important right now?
Yeah. For me, I mean, how do I define healing is, I think modern medicine defines healing as a lack of illness. Like, oh, you don't have any symptoms, then you're healthy. And in herbal medicine, I think of health as being like an active state. You're not just you don't have a headache, therefore you're healthy, but it's also a sense of well-being, a sense of feeling grounded, present, happy, engaged with life. And there's things that people say that I've heard people say oh yeah, I'm 50, so of course I have arthritis. Of course my things feel like that. And I'm in my 50s and I don't have arthritis. It doesn't have to happen that way.
It doesn't have to happen that way. Yeah. It doesn't have to happen. We don't have to age and suffer the way that we've been led to believe.
Right.
I'm going to be 45 at the end of this month, and I feel better at 45 than I did at 35 because of plant medicine,
Yes. Nice. Me too.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in better shape now than I was when I was 40.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel I'm sleeping better. I feel more motivated to work out. And so when you were talking about the qualities of introducing plants in your life, it doesn't have to necessarily be that you're ill or that you're sick. It's that you're seeking vitality.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Chinese medicine has a big influence on my life. Even though I'm a Western herbalist, I use a lot of Chinese medicine in my clinical practice and then also when I teach. And in Chinese medicine, the big emphasis, just like in Ayurveda, I believe, is not just eliminating illness, but also promoting wellness. What can we do every day? I take tinctures every morning, not because I'm sick, but because they will help promote my healthy well-being and help me live both longer, happier, healthier. So I think about that with the foods that I eat, with the tinctures that I take, with going for walks in the woods and connecting with nature as a way to let go of the digital world that we're in so much, and which we kind of have to be in some ways to participate in the world. But then I think it's also good to let go of that sometimes and spend time away from technology to refresh who our original beings are, right? To remember who we were, who our ancestors were, so to speak.
And it's innate in us, right? It's not just to remember, but it is in us. It is innate in us to want to be connected to nature.
Right. Yeah.
You said, this has been hitting me, but in Ayurveda, it's said that it is our God-given right to be healthy. And so, like you said, it doesn't even have to be a conversation of disease or disease management. It can be a conversation of how healthy do you want to be? Right. How healthy, how vital are you ready to embrace the plant world? Because in Ayurveda, like you said, traditional Chinese medicine, it's prana, and in Chinese medicine, it's qi, but the plants give us life force.
Right. Yes, yeah, definitely. And that connection with the plants, connection with nature, I think, to me, taking the medicine is, taking the herbs internally is important and it's helpful. And like I said, I do it every day. But I feel like a deeper level of herbal medicine is just this idea of spending time in the woods, spending time connecting with nature, and remembering that we aren't separate from nature. We're not we came from this earth, our bodies are made up of plants. And
what a concept, right? We actually are from this earth. We're not.
Yeah. We didn't like beam
Yeah.
down like from Star Trek, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. This is our world. This is our playground. So
Right.
tell me, I would like you to distinguish for me as well as listeners the difference between Western herbalism, and you're also, steeped in Chinese herbalism. But what is that distinction? What makes Western herbalism Western herbalism?
Hmm. It's a good question. And in some ways, Western herbalism is a little bit of a catch-all because I find that every Western herbalist does their practice a little bit differently. It has a lot of different streams that come into it.
Mhm.
I mean, we could say Western herbalism comes a lot from the European tradition, which was like the Greek medicine that then became the Roman medicine and then spread throughout Europe, then combine that with the folk medicine. And a lot of our plants that we know and love are like in this European tradition. And then Western herbalism also incorporates the Native American tradition as well. Yeah, sorry, Native American traditions, because there are
Right in
many,
those
many different,
Right in those Native
traditions.
American traditions, they also saw plants, right, as having spirit in them. Like they saw energetics of plants, even though it might not be like traditional Chinese medicine. They
Right,
had their own understanding of that there's spirit, that there's life force in the plant itself too.
right. Yes. Matter of fact, the ah, I'm not gonna try to pronounce this because I'll probably butcher it, but the Cherokee word for plants is those who are awake. Isn't that great?
Wow. Oh my gosh, I love that. Those who are awake.
Right.
And so that if that's true, then I believe in my journey into Ayurveda and into healing that I have become more and more conscious being and more awake and more attuned and more loving and caring of nature because I'm in right relationship with her.
Right.
If when I was sick and I was diseased and I did come from a past of a healing crisis, I was not in I wasn't awake because I was separate from nature herself. And as I've become more and more drawn to the healing arts, I find myself to become more and more of a conscious being,
Right.
which is, the summit, part 3 of it is to elevate your soul. It's
Mm.
that when you get in right relationship with plants, right relationship with the earth, there's a part of you that your soul, you're touched by nature. Your soul is awakened. Your soul is much more alive and awakened. Like that says, like those who are awake, because you're
Yes.
connecting not with like the physical body, but you're connecting at this higher plane.
Right. Right.
That is so beautiful. I love that. I had to write that down.
I love it. And sometimes, I mean, usually I do give my clients herbs, but often I'm also telling them, by the way, you also need to get your hands in the dirt at least 2 or 3 times a week. And that could be gardening, or it could be just go outside and just put your hand on the earth. If you live in the city, it could be, the tree that grows in the sidewalk. It could be like the local city park. Just like sit down and like put your hand on the earth. You don't have to like live way out in the mountains to use herbal medicine or to connect with nature. You could be in the city. It's still, there's trees, there's plants, there's ways to connect. Um,
Yeah, that's so important too, what you just said, because I think we also think if we live in a metropolitan area, if we're in a city, that we're outside from it. But yet I have like on the summit, one of the people that I'm bringing on is she's an urban homesteader, like an urban farm, an urban homesteader. And there's no reason that we can't start to bring nature into the metropolitan way of living. Like people, it blows my mind that all these yards are covered in grass. They could be covered in people's big, large landscapes of mowing grass and throwing pesticide and watering grass that does nothing for feeding us could actually be beautiful wild harvest. You could just let it go wild and grow stuff in it, and you'd have dandelion root, and you could have a lot of wild plants in that garden itself that could benefit you. Could you talk about that? Just like the what's
sure.
wild and what's edible, like that people
Yeah.
could start to bring into urban environments.
I, and I, you mean like about specific plants?
Yeah, like people, I don't think that people realize that like we can take urban environments and let them get a little wild, like grow.
Yes.
Like I said, grass is just like this country is covered in grass that's watered and pesticides and Roundup is thrown on it. And it's
Right.
very costly and time consuming to
Yeah.
pay landscapers to keep things looking majestic, but really like
Right.
we're not benefiting from that right now.
Yeah. Like look up and find out like what are your like local native plants. And it's become more of a trend these days of
Yeah.
using landscaping with local plants, landscaping with native plants, I should say.
Mhm. Yeah.
But even the weeds, I mean, in my yard, I have dandelion, burdock, yellow dock, mullein, mugwort, because there's some places that I don't mow. And I'm trying to like mow less and less. It's taking some time. It takes time to convert your yard from grass into like
It
food
does.
stuff,
Yeah.
you
And it
know?
takes a vision. It takes a
Yes.
true vision.
Yeah. So I'm trying to get rid of some of these like really, really invasive plants and start to put in some more native plants that will feed the pollinators, which will then pollinate the garden plants. Um, it's funny, what first came to mind too is this piece of how the like in there's a Brooklyn community gardens. So even in like big cities like New York City, they have like community gardens and they have rooftop gardens where you can garden. And in Asheville, there's a place called Patchwork Farms, and I had a CSA, I would get a veggie box from them like every week. And what they do is they contract with people living in the city, or yeah, pretty much in the city, and just say, yeah, we just want like a quarter acre, just like a small plot on your land, just to like take out some grass and like put in like rows of broccoli and carrots, and then so they have like these small, that's what it's called, patchwork. They have like all these little farms around
Patchwork.
Asheville.
Oh,
Yeah, is
so
that a
cool.
great
It's like a
idea?
patchwork all over Asheville. Wouldn't that be awesome though, if all across the US, like we could start to patchwork our yards that are, water is becoming a resource that we can't just waste anymore. And,
Right.
if you're out west, that becomes more important. But with the cost of living and inflation, like to just keep maintaining yards that aren't feeding us or serving us it's a big area of growth for Americans.
I like to say
So
that.
how, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I like to say that like the dandelions that we spray pesticides on are the same dandelions that will protect our livers from the pesticides that we spray on them.
Isn't the irony of that just blow you away? Yeah, because
Right.
our livers are so congested with toxins, and yet we're throwing 80,000 man-made chemicals, and the things that we're killing are our medicine.
Right. So many of
Mhm.
these weeds are medicinal. So many weeds are either edible or medicinal, or have they help pollinators. There's some things like henbit or dead nettle. Dead nettle is one of the first plants that comes up around me in Asheville, and it's very short, about that tall, blooms in like February and March. It's edible if you cook it really well. I don't particularly find it that tasty. Some of my friends love it. Edible foods, just kind of like broccoli. Not everybody likes broccoli. Not everybody likes every edible food. So if you try a wild food and you don't like it, try a different one. Maybe you just didn't like that one food. But that one is like, it's a great herb for the pollinators. It's because nothing much else is out that time of year that's flowering. So the bees and other pollinators in
Need
February and
it.
March, they love the dead nettle because they can go and feed on it, and they get the pollen from it. So everything has a role, and that's really beautiful to see.
Yeah. I have one more thing to say around that, and then I want to switch a question just to guide the conversation, because we only have so much time together.
Sure.
When I started studying Ayurveda, Kate Stillman was really, big on eating and wilding your palate. She was an Ayurvedic practitioner that I studied under. And wilding your palate is that when we're eating a standard American diet, we're used to the sweet and sour and salty taste. And so our taste buds are drawn to those tastes. And yet the bitters and the astringents are what is a little bit more wild. And people that you said, like they aren't accustomed to that taste because they haven't wilded their palate yet. And that takes time. It's like when you have a child, you have to just keep trying something until your palate begins to create a taste for that bitter and astringent taste. And just so you said, these really bitter and astringent herbs that come out, like you said, in February and March are exactly what we need to clean up the mucus from the winter months, because we've been eating a heavier diet of probably breads and meats and cheeses. And then we start to get really congested in the spring. And then Mother Nature is like so beautiful. She knows exactly what to give us. And yet we're like unaware that that's the medicine that we need at exactly the right time.
Right. I mean, just picking a few dandelion leaves from your yard. Dandelion leaves by themselves are pretty bitter. And so if you're not used to bitter, the viewers, like, speaking to you, like you might not be used to like that intense of bitter, but just take it, cut it into pieces, just like small little pieces, and then mix that in with the rest of your salad.
Yes,
you don't need to like hit yourself over the head with bitters when you first start. Edge into it, but start incorporating. I love that. I think bitter is the flavor that's most missing in the American diet. And it is so helpful to stimulate our liver, to stimulate digestion. I actually make a bitters blend that I take, especially like around the holiday times, but it's something I would take like before a meal. And the bitters stimulate my digestion. They kind of like prime the pump and get things going. And it's the whole reason that we traditionally like eat a salad before a meal. A salad traditionally wasn't just like iceberg lettuce. It had some, maybe endive or chicory or dandelion greens in there, things that were a little bit bitter, a little bit pungent. Maybe like arugula, which is bitter and a little bit pungent. Things that stimulate the appetite and kind of get things moving. So I think that's a great way to like start. If you're just started on the bitter train, buy some, go to your local Whole Foods or, natural food store and just get some like spring mix and just start with that.
Yeah, I love that. So what is your favorite category of herbs right now? Where are you drawn in your practice to herbs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm back and forth between adaptogens and nervines, which is funny because they both deal with stress, but in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
Adaptogens.
Why those two, right? Why are you drawn? Because I like you, mine are adaptogens and nootropics right now, but why adaptogens?
Yeah. So why adaptogens? Adaptogens. So if you're not familiar with this word, it's starting to become more well-known, but if you're not familiar, it means any herb that gives you the ability to adapt to stress, whether that stress is mental, emotional, or even physical stress. They first studied eleuthero root, eleuthero ginseng, as a way in Russia. That was the original adaptogen. They studied it as a way to give Russian athletes more physical endurance. And then afterwards, they discovered it also allowed more mental and emotional endurance. You could have more resilience to stress, for example. And I love the adaptogens because so many of us, we live in a stressful world. The modern world is just stressful. I mean, just driving back and forth to the grocery store can be stressful.
Right around Thanksgiving time too, right?
Especially around Thanksgiving.
Right as this is being recorded, it's like a madhouse right now.
Right. Yeah, like let alone like driving to your, family's place, or maybe for some of us being at our family's place. There's all these
that too.
It's all these different stressors that can like come up this time of year. And so adaptogens are things we can take before we get stressed, right? So like, oh, I know it's gonna be a stressful week. I'm gonna start taking some holy basil, or maybe some ginseng, maybe some rhodiola or maca. There's all these great adaptogens. Ashwagandha is actually one of my favorites from the Ayurvedic tradition. And they help us because stress is not about the how much external stress we experience, but what is our internal reaction to it. So adaptogens help us experience more external stress without causing an internal stress reaction. That's kind of like a good way to like sum up adaptogens. And one of the reasons I love ashwagandha and I use ashwagandha so much is because it's calming, but it also nourishes energy. So it's energizing, but unlike coffee, which gives you temporary energy, it actually gives you kind of like long-term energy, but then is calming in the short term.
Yeah,
Which
so
somebody else needs.
in the Ayurvedic tradition, ashwagandha is considered a rejuvenative, like you said. So it will calm, different than like a nervine, right? It will calm. It does have a nervine effect, but it's a rejuvenative. And in Ayurveda, if you are weak in your immune system, meaning your ojas is weak, then you would need to bring in rejuvenatives to restore ojas. And so, like you said, an adaptogen, the way I think of it, is really easy to explain. It's like it knows how to adapt and come into your body, and it finds kind of like the missing links, if you will, and it just like it moves in, and it kind of takes time. Like it's not going to work like we were talking about a pharmaceutical. It's like a one and done punch. Adaptogens take time, but if used over time, they are very effective in resiliency and stress.
Right.
And that, what you said too about when you were talking, it was urethra, right? Is that what you said about the Russian? Is that the one you said? I loved what you said. I wrote down that it helps with the physical, mental, and emotional endurance. And that goes back to what we're talking about, is you don't necessarily have to be sick. You could be a somebody in sports, you could be a CEO, you could be a stressed out mom. But if you need that endurance, you're like, I feel great. I'm not sick. There's nothing wrong with me, but how do I go from this plane to like getting up to here? You know, like
Right.
they were using it for endurance. I mean, these were high performance people that were looking to plant medicine, not because they were sick, but because they said, how can I maximize my physical, emotional, and mental health?
Right. And the reason why the Russians thought to research it to begin with is because the Siberian people, which I guess is also part of Russia, but the Siberian people traditionally use that plant as a longevity tonic. They'd use it when people were like, as they got older, they got tired more easily, or they were just recovering from an illness and they were exhausted, depleted. Telephone.
Yeah, no, I didn't hear it. Right. So it has that rejuvenative, restoring, and helps you be resilient.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that resiliency thing, the ability to like feel stress or like experience what could be externally stressful events, but not have a stress response to, not feel internally stressed, but be able to kind of come through grace under pressure. That's how I like to think about adaptogens. They give us grace under pressure.
Right.
And the challenge with that is that so many of us experience so much pressure in the modern world. I mean, who of us is not like already burning the candle at both ends? And I think the challenge is, I'd like to say, like, I really hope that people don't use adaptogens just to like be able to try to do even more stressful things, but use adaptogens to nourish yourself, and then also take a break, try to have fewer externally stressful events to the extent that we can. You know, you almost can't live in the modern world without having some stressors, right?
And I like what you're saying around this too, because it's inevitable that stress is going to happen. But I believe what herbalism does and Ayurveda, and what I'm hoping the summit will do, is that as you grow in your mindfulness, your awakeness or awareness, your consciousness around plants, is that you actually, when you have that resiliency and that ojas, or that deep immunity and strength, you actually have a greater capacity for stress. You can actually take on more and do more, because you're amplifying your capacity to hold that. When you have resiliency, when you take these rejuvenative herbs, when you feel really good in your body, you have a greater capacity for more. Doesn't mean that you should do it in a way that's going to burn the candle at both ends of the stick, but it does give you greater sleep. Your working hours a day, that performance can be much stronger and more directive. And so what a gift, right? That we have
Yeah.
in adaptogens. I love that. Yeah. And so you
Well
said
put.
adaptogens
Well
and
put.
then nervines. So what is it? Why are you drawn to nervines?
So nervines are kind of like the other side of the stress piece, right? So
Mhm.
nervines are herbs. Literally, it means herbs that affect the nervous system or tonifying, nourishing for the nervous system. But in practice, it usually means relaxing herbs. So nervine is an herb that helps us relax our nervous system because so many of us are so stressed out and tightly held that we need nervines to help kind of like take the edge off a little bit. I see so many of my clients and even like so many of my students, like more and more of my students I find over the years have anxiety.
Mhm.
I just see anxiety levels going up so much. I see it in the statistics, but I actually see it in my students who are like, like the up and coming generation. The level of baseline anxiety is just so much higher than it was 10 years ago. Um, Whether it's due to social media or just the past couple of years of crisis and everything that we're experiencing, insomnia, anxiety, depression, there's so much of this going on. Nervines help uplift our spirits. They can help us with depression. They can bring down anxiety. I think a lot of anxiety and depression specifically, which is just so common in modern America and probably the modern world, we can help by nourishing the nervous system.
I
Sometimes our
love
nervous
this.
system is so, yeah, our nervous
I
system is like
love
so strung out. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just have to like say how much I love
Mhm.
this because what you're saying is profound in the sense that we're kind of in this crisis on the globe right now. I mean, we're still in, I don't think that the COVID era is over. I mean, we're going into possibly a great recession period. There's like this constant edge of angst of what's next. What are we coming up against? And what I love about what you're saying about these herbs is they're timely to what humanity needs right now.
Yes.
You're drawn to these herbs and I am too. And that's why I'm loving this conversation, is because that if you're, I actually share space with my mom, who's a psychologist, and or she works with mental health. And I can't tell you how saddened I am because obviously when they're on a Zoom call, that's private client information, but I know the energy of people coming in with mental health conditions who are not dealing with their guts. They're not dealing with stress through mindfulness or yoga or these practices. They may be coming in and doing talk therapy, or they may be doing like EMDR or trauma healing. But one of the things that I've been so excited about for Ayurveda, for herbalists, for naturopaths is that for people with mental health issues, like you're talking about anxiety, stress, overwhelm, insomnia,
Mhm.
is that if they're only dealing on it like on the physical, mental plane, they're not healing the gut as well as like you're talking about, like this nervous system has to have a letdown effect in order to heal. Like
Right.
in my practice as an Ayurvedic practitioner, a lot of what I do in my Ayurvedic body therapies is to get people into the parasympathetic nervous system. But if they're so amped up and their anxiety is so high, or their trauma is so high, or their exposure to the media or fear is so high, we have to get them into the parasympathetic in order for that healing to occur.
Right. The rest
And
and digest. Yeah.
yeah. And so if mental health practitioners aren't aware, or they're not working with Ayurvedic practitioners or herbalists or naturopaths or homeopathy, they're all of us come in with a different angle. And the beauty of what you're doing has its own beauty. But each
Mm.
of us has the capacity to help conventional medicine or mental health practitioners, because they might not know what's going to be the right nervine, because there's some nervines, right, that are really, really strong and sedative, and there's some that are really
Right.
mild. And from an Ayurvedic perspective, you wouldn't want to give a kapha a really strong nervine sedative
Right.
because
Like
that might
valerian.
actually sedate them either further. But if you had a vata condition, a vata vikriti or a vata body type, you would definitely need to bring
Yeah.
that in. And it takes like what we've been talking about, somebody who really understands the medicine and the power of it to be able to
Yeah.
rightfully give that right medicine at the right time for the right person. But what I
Right.
love what you're saying, and this is why I'm drawn to similar, for me, it's the adaptogens and the nootropics. That for another reason, because in my mind, we have an aging baby boomer population. We have a population of people that are going to have Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. And the time to be doing that is not when it's too late. It's to start when you're in your 40s and your 50s or your 30s or your 20s. Like by the time you're 80, it's not that those herbs aren't going to help you, but what if you had started those herbs 20 to 30 years before? What if you were working with adaptogens and all of these things? So I love what you're saying, because what you're saying is they're timely to what humanity needs right now.
And the nerve vines aren't, I mean, I mentioned nerve vines are often very relaxing, but they're also very nourishing. And that's something that doesn't really exist in conventional modern medicine, that there's things that affect the body, but there's nothing that really nourishes the body. Maybe supplements, you could think of that as, I mean, don't even know if that's modern medicine. That's more considered more alternative medicine, integrative medicine. Yeah. But like nerve vines, adaptogens, these are things that are actually like nourishing the body. They're like deeply nourishing. They're almost like herbs as food, like these really specialized foods that nourish the nervous system, that nourish the adrenals. And that's what I love about those. Adaptogens, I would say.
Yeah, I use a lot, like you said, ashwagandha being an Ayurvedic herb, I use a ton of ashwagandha in my practice. There's a Ayurvedic body therapy called Shirodhara, and basically what it is the herbs are cooked in oil. I know you probably know this, but I'm just saying this for people listening. But the herbs are cooked into nervine sedatives and tonics, and when they're poured over the pineal gland and the forehead and the scalp, within 5 minutes they enter the bloodstream. And people are coming in for the therapy, but the energetics of those herbs, they are exactly what you're saying. They're adaptogens, and they're nervine sedatives and nervine tonic can take people into a bliss state that they can't get to on their own if they're in this highly adrenalized state or stress or insomnia or anxiety. And it's definitely, I think, needed to be understood more and more. And I hope the summit, just by people hearing it, just is like a light bulb. Oh my gosh, like let's learn more. So with that, talk about how herbs show up differently, like how as a medicine, what forms of herbs in what ways would, I think people think of herbs like you get it in capsule form, but it's way more than that. Can you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, I think capsules are probably the most available form. Like you can go to a mall and find a GNC and stuff is in capsules. And I think that's available. And I think it's a totally fine way to take herbs. A lot of herbalists, though, prefer tinctures, which are alcohol extracts. So that those come as like a liquid form. Let's see, do I have one? No, I have one like back over here. I can grab it, but they come with like little like eyedroppers, and that's the way that I tend to prefer to take herbal medicine. If someone doesn't do alcohol at all, you can like get a cup or a mug and put just a little bit of water in there, and then put your dose, put a squirt or two of the tincture into there. If someone doesn't do alcohol at all, you can do, there's glycerin extracts, there's vinegar extracts, there's other ways of taking it. But I think the liquid extracts work more directly and stronger than the capsules. But the capsules aren't bad. They're still like they're very accessible. And so that's like, I'm not putting down capsules, but I like once you powder something, it starts to lose a little bit of potency. Just like, when you grind your own black pepper instead of buying the pre-ground black pepper because it has a stronger flavor. So the same thing with a lot of herbs as well. And then of course, tea. Like tea, I think is like, tea is the way that humans have been using herbal medicine for the past, who knows, 40,000 years, right? Yeah. So tea is the ultimate way to take herbal medicine. And the reason why I didn't mention that first is because, I know people are probably watching from around the world, but I know in America, at least, we don't have as much of a tea culture. And it's a little bit extra time. I do find it's this beautiful ritual. It's a way of like nourishing yourself. Like, oh, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to take this 15 minutes for myself to boil the water and brew the tea and wait till it calms down and sit on the couch and drink it. But the modern lifestyle is so fast. A lot of people don't want to take that time. But I love tea, and for roots and barks, I'd say you want to simmer it for maybe 20 minutes. And for leaves and flowers, you can like put it in your cup, put it in like in a filter, and then cover it and let it sit for 15 minutes, and then strain it out and drink it. But I think that's really the best way to take herbs, is often. Depends upon the herb too. But I love that the tea things, it's almost like soup. It's like our body recognizes it. It's so nourishing. Those
And in I was just going to say, in Ayurveda, it builds your Agni. So our digestive fire, when we introduce tea and we're drinking warm tea versus people drink ice cold water here, in the US, it's like that actually builds your metabolism or your digestive fire by drinking warm tea, which is a very Ayurvedic concept over just drinking cold water, where people go to restaurants, they get iced water.
Right. I learned in my anatomy physiology class that your stomach wants everything to be 102 degrees soup.
Yeah, 102 degrees. It's like, and then you throw this like cold liquid on your stomach. It's like your cells, they contract in that cold environment. Right. So since we don't have a lot of time left, I'd like you to talk about a little bit about your school and your book, just so that people know who you are, where to find you, and also your contribution to writing a book is, it's a contribution to humanity. So just take a few minutes and speak to that, please.
Sure. Yeah. I started the Blue Ridge School of Herbal Medicine last millennium. I love that. It started in 1999. Like I have my school T-shirt on. I'm repping for myself here.
Yeah.
And we do a blend of Western herbalism and Chinese medicine. And I use primarily herbs that grow either both native or introduced into the United States. So I still use a lot of European plants, and I still use also some Chinese plants. And like we talked about with ashwagandha, I use some Indian plants as well. But I love Chinese medicine as a way of differentiating, of really getting to the root cause of disease, understanding like, oh, when is this an excess? Like we talked about nervines. When is this a condition of an excess of the nervous system? We need to calm things down. When is this a deficiency of the nervous system? We need to nourish and build. And so that's been my perspective. That's the way that I learned. And there's, in the words of Mahatma Gandhi, like there's many roads to the top of the mountain, like Ayurveda gets you there, Chinese medicine, Western herbalism, there's all these different traditions that look at the map of the human body in a different way.
Yeah.
So I love introducing people to the plants, connecting them to the plants, then talking about how to understand the body better. And to that end, I wrote this book. I happen to have one here, Southeast Medicinal Plants. Timber Press put out there's 6 of these covering the whole United States. And it's 106 herbs that grow from Maryland to Central Florida, west to the Ozarks. So it covered a huge area. And for each one, and I did all the photography as well. Like there's a picture of that plant that a lot of us have in our yards, Japanese honeysuckle. This plant, it's just a weed around here, Linistra japonica. People don't think much of it, except it smells nice. But it's a major herb in Chinese medicine as an antiviral. And we've even seen it used in some of the formulas for COVID, because it is such a powerful antiviral. And it's the flowers that are used, but you could also use the stems as well. Just to give you one example of the herbs covered in this book.
Right. So I had a question. You said the book covered 6 regions. Is yours just one of those 6 regions, or your book covers 6 regions in the Southeast?
Sorry. No.
I just wanted to clarify. I wasn't sure myself. So.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Timber Press published 6 different books for the 6 different areas of the United States.
And you did the Southeast.
I did the one for the Southeast. Yes.
Nice.
Exactly.
So if somebody was, say, in the West, then they could get the same book from Timber Ridge Press for the West Coast, or that's nice. Right. So if people who are hearing this know that wherever they are, they can find the herbs that are indigenous or native to where they live.
Yeah, there's one for the Southwest, there's one for the Rocky Mountains, Northwest, Midwest, and Northeast.
Yeah. And it's so important, right, to know what's in your own backyard, kind of like we were talking about. If we really want to grow the capacity for healing, we can begin right in our own backyards. And so it has been such a
Mhm.
pleasure speaking with you today. I loved where this conversation went. And you have a book that, or a little pamphlet you're working on for insomnia.
Yes.
So just like we were talking about the nervine sedatives and the adaptogens for people with insomnia, this would be a great tool for them to begin to explore herbs. So this is a free gift you're offering for the summit. And I appreciate you offering a free gift for our listeners and having you today.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Paige. It's been great to be here. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And yeah, I hope like you viewers have gotten a lot out of it.
Yeah, these conversations light me up,
Okay.
and reason I'm doing the summit. It's a rich experience for all of us. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Paige.